Have you ever met someone who understood you without needing every feeling explained? Someone who noticed the change in your voice before anyone else did, who could tell something was wrong even when you insisted you were fine. Those kinds of people are incredibly rare, and most of us don't realize how extraordinary they are until they're no longer standing beside us. That is exactly the realization your soulmate has recently been forced to face. They believed they understood what your connection meant while you were together, but life has quietly shown them something they never expected. As they continued meeting new people, having new conversations, and trying to build new chapters, they kept running into the same invisible emptiness. People listened, but they didn't truly understand. People heard their words, but they missed the emotions hidden between the sentences. For the first time, your soulmate began comparing those experiences to the way you once knew them, and that comparison awakened a truth they had overlooked for far too long. They suddenly realized you never needed long explanations to understand what was happening inside them. You recognized the weight behind their silence. You noticed when they were pretending to be strong. You celebrated their victories without jealousy and stood beside them during their fears without judgment. You accepted the parts of them they often struggled to accept themselves. They never fully appreciated how rare that was, because your understanding always felt so effortless. Now, in your absence, they have discovered that what came naturally with you cannot simply be replaced. Every ordinary conversation reminds them of what is missing. Every moment they wish someone truly understood them quietly brings your memory back into their heart. The most surprising part is that this realization didn't arrive during a dramatic moment. It appeared in the middle of ordinary life, where they least expected it, making it impossible to ignore. Stay with me, because once your soulmate recognized that you were the only person who ever truly saw the real version of them, they began feeling your absence in a way they never thought possible. And that realization is changing everything they believed about this connection. Your soulmate never expected that your absence would become the very thing that taught them your true value. While you were together, your understanding felt so natural that they rarely stopped to think about how extraordinary it actually was. It became part of everyday life, like breathing fresh air without ever noticing its importance. They assumed there would always be someone who could understand them so effortlessly. They believed that emotional comfort was something easily found, something that naturally existed in every meaningful connection. But life has a quiet way of revealing the rarity of certain blessings only after they are gone. As time passed and new people entered their life, they slowly began realizing that although conversations continued, something essential was missing. They could laugh with others, share stories, and even receive advice, yet they constantly walked away with an emptiness they couldn't explain. It wasn't because the people around them lacked kindness. It was because none of them understood the unspoken parts of who they were the way you always had. That realization didn't arrive all at once. It appeared through dozens of ordinary moments that slowly formed an undeniable truth. Imagine living in a house filled with sunlight every single day. You wake up surrounded by warmth, never questioning whether the light will return tomorrow. Then one day, you're placed in a room with no windows. At first you adjust. You tell yourself you'll get used to it. But as the days pass, you begin remembering what natural light felt like. You realize it wasn't simply brightness that made the difference. It was the feeling of life that came with it. That's exactly what your soulmate is experiencing now. While you were part of their life, your emotional understanding became the sunlight they never thought to appreciate. Now, surrounded by people who cannot see them the same way, they have finally recognized how deeply your presence illuminated parts of their heart they didn't even know were hidden. Another image comes to mind. Imagine walking through a familiar forest with someone who always knew the safest paths. You never worried about getting lost because they instinctively guided you around every obstacle. Then one day you must walk the same forest alone. Suddenly every path feels uncertain. Every decision requires more effort. You begin realizing how much confidence came simply from having the right person beside you. That's how your soulmate now remembers your connection. They didn't appreciate how often you brought peace into situations that could have easily become overwhelming. You knew when to speak and when to simply listen. You knew when they needed encouragement and when they needed silence. You never tried to change who they were. Instead, you gave them the freedom to become more of themselves. Now that freedom feels incredibly difficult to find anywhere else. Perhaps you've quietly wondered, why are they missing me so much now when they didn't seem to before? The answer is that some forms of love become fully visible only through absence. While something is part of everyday life, the heart easily mistakes it for something ordinary. Only when it disappears do we recognize how much of our emotional well-being depended upon it. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that your greatest gift wasn't dramatic romance or endless excitement. It was emotional safety. It was knowing there was one person who accepted them completely, without demanding they become someone else first. That kind of acceptance is far rarer than they ever imagined, and life has slowly shown them that replacing it isn't nearly as easy as they once believed. Think about an old melody you heard every day growing up. At the time, you barely noticed it because it was always there. Then years later, you unexpectedly hear those same notes again. Instantly, memories flood back with remarkable clarity. You realize that the melody had quietly become part of who you are without you ever recognizing its importance. That's what memories of you have become for your soulmate. Ordinary moments unexpectedly remind them of your patience, your quiet understanding, and the comfort they always felt in your presence. A simple conversation, a familiar place, or even a brief silence now carries echoes of what they once experienced with you. They aren't trying to compare everyone else to you. It simply happens because your presence established a standard of emotional connection they never knew was so rare. There is an old saying that feels especially meaningful here. You never truly understand the value of peace until life becomes noisy. Your soulmate is beginning to live those words every day. They now realize that while many people entered their life with excitement, very few brought genuine peace. You brought both understanding and calmness into their world without asking for recognition. You listened beyond words. You understood beyond explanations. You accepted beyond imperfections. Those qualities have become impossible for them to overlook because every new experience quietly reminds them of what is no longer there. With every passing day, gratitude begins replacing assumption. Appreciation begins replacing indifference, and a profound longing begins replacing certainty. They are no longer wondering whether you were special. They are finally understanding that the emotional home they spent so long searching for in other people had been standing beside them all along. And that realization is transforming everything they thought they knew about love, connection, and the irreplaceable place you still hold within their heart. The more your soulmate reflects on your connection, the more they begin to understand that what made you different was never something obvious. It wasn't one grand gesture, one unforgettable conversation, or one dramatic moment that set you apart from everyone else. It was the countless small things you did without expecting recognition. They have started remembering how you could sense when something was wrong before they ever found the courage to say it out loud. They remembered days when they tried to convince everyone that everything was fine, yet somehow you would quietly ask, "Are you really okay?" That simple question carried more comfort than they ever admitted because it reminded them they didn't have to pretend around you. At the time, they accepted your understanding as though it were something ordinary. Now they realize how incredibly rare it was to be truly seen by another person without having to explain every emotion hidden beneath the surface. Imagine searching for a key for years, believing it had been lost forever. You try countless replacements, forcing different keys into the same lock, hoping one of them will fit. None of them do. Then one day, you unexpectedly discover the original key, tucked away exactly where it had always belonged. The lock opens effortlessly, And only then do you realize that no substitute could ever replace what was made specifically for that purpose. That is the realization slowly unfolding inside your soulmate's heart. They have encountered many people since your paths separated. Some were kind, some were thoughtful, some genuinely tried to understand them. Yet every connection somehow felt incomplete, because none of them reached the quiet places within their heart the way you always did. They now understand that your connection wasn't built on convenience. It was built on a level of emotional understanding that cannot simply be recreated with someone new. Another memory has begun returning to them again and again. They remember the moments when they became overwhelmed by life, when responsibilities felt heavy and emotions became difficult to carry. While others offered solutions, you offered presence. While others hurried to fix every problem, you first made them feel understood. You didn't rush their healing or pressure them to become stronger overnight. You simply remained beside them until they found their own strength again. Looking back, your soulmate realizes that your greatest gift was never having all the answers. Your greatest gift was making them feel safe enough to search for those answers themselves. That kind of emotional security has become almost impossible for them to find anywhere else. And now they finally understand why your presence always brought them a peace they could never fully explain. Perhaps one question has quietly lived inside your heart. Do they finally realize how much I truly meant to them? The answer is becoming clearer with every passing day. They are beginning to understand that your value was never measured by how often you spoke or how many promises were made. It was measured by how deeply life feels different without you. Every ordinary day now reminds them of extraordinary moments they once overlooked. They remember how you celebrated their smallest victories as though they were your own. They remember how you believed in them during seasons when they struggled to believe in themselves. They remember how you accepted both their strengths and their flaws without making them feel they had to earn your love. Those memories no longer feel ordinary. They feel irreplaceable. Think about standing in a crowded room filled with endless conversations, yet somehow feeling completely alone. Then imagine remembering one person whose silence made you feel more understood than all those conversations combined. That's exactly what your soulmate is experiencing now. They are beginning to recognize that emotional connection isn't created by constant communication. It is created by genuine understanding. You never needed perfect words to comfort them, because your presence itself became a language they instinctively trusted. Even when nothing was being said, they felt seen, accepted, and understood. Now, despite meeting many people, they find themselves searching for that same quiet feeling and realizing it simply isn't there. There is another image that perfectly reflects what has awakened inside them. Imagine spending years surrounded by constant noise, until one day you step into a peaceful valley where everything becomes still. At first, the silence feels unfamiliar. Then you begin noticing birds singing, leaves moving in the wind, and your own heartbeat slowing down. When you eventually leave that place, every noisy environment reminds you of the peace you lost. Your soulmate now understands that you were that peaceful place in their emotional world. You brought calm into situations that once felt overwhelming. You never competed with their fears. You gently helped them move beyond them. You never demanded perfection. You simply created an environment where they could be completely themselves without fear of judgment. That emotional refuge has become one of the things they miss most. There is an old saying that speaks directly to this moment. Home is not always a place. Sometimes it is a person who allows your soul to rest. Those words now echo deeply within your soulmate's heart. They finally understand that what they lost wasn't merely a relationship. They lost someone who understood the language of their soul before they even understood it themselves. Every passing day strengthens that realization. Gratitude grows where assumption once lived. Admiration replaces familiarity. And alongside that gratitude comes a profound regret, because they now see that while they spent so much time searching for understanding in the world around them, The one person who truly understood them had been standing beside them all along. That truth has become impossible to ignore, and it is preparing their heart for a decision they know they cannot postpone forever. Your soulmate has reached a place they never imagined they would find themselves. It isn't simply that they miss you. It is that your absence has quietly woven itself into the ordinary moments of their life, making them realize just how deeply your presence shaped their emotional world. They notice it in conversations where no one understands what they truly mean. They notice it after difficult days when they instinctively wish there was someone who could calm their thoughts with just a few sincere words. They notice it during moments of success when they look around, almost expecting to see the one person who celebrated their victories without envy and encouraged them without making everything about themselves. These moments arrive without warning, and every single one carries the same painful message. The person who made them feel genuinely understood is no longer standing beside them. That realization has become impossible to ignore because it isn't tied to one special memory. It has become part of everyday life. Imagine wandering through a city you've lived in for years, only to discover that every familiar street somehow reminds you of someone who is no longer there. The buildings haven't changed. The roads are exactly the same. Yet everything feels different because one important presence is missing from the picture. That's how your soulmate experiences their own life now. The routines continue. Responsibilities remain. People still come and go. But beneath all of it exists an invisible emptiness they cannot explain to anyone else. It isn't loneliness in the ordinary sense. It's the absence of the one person who understood the language of their heart without needing constant explanations. That kind of connection leaves a space that ordinary companionship simply cannot fill. As these emotions continue growing stronger, your soulmate has also begun noticing something unexpected. They instinctively compare new experiences to the peace they once felt with you, even when they don't intend to. Someone may offer advice, but it doesn't carry the same comfort. Someone may listen, but they don't truly hear what remains unspoken. Someone may care, but they cannot reach the deeper places within their heart the way you always did. This isn't because the people around them are unkind. It's because genuine emotional understanding cannot be manufactured. It grows naturally between two souls willing to know each other beyond appearances. They now understand that what existed between the two of you was never ordinary compatibility. It was a rare emotional harmony they didn't fully appreciate until life showed them how uncommon it truly was. Think about a traveler who spends years searching for a place that feels like home. They visit beautiful destinations, meet wonderful people, and collect unforgettable experiences, yet something inside them continues searching. Then one day, they realize they had already found home long ago, but failed to recognize it because they believed it would always be waiting. That is the lesson quietly unfolding within your soulmate. They are beginning to understand that home was never just a location or a moment in time. Home was the feeling they experienced whenever they were with someone who accepted them completely, who never forced them to hide their fears or pretend to be stronger than they were. You created that feeling without asking for recognition, and only now do they understand how priceless it truly was. You may wonder why, if these feelings are so powerful, they haven't immediately reached out. The answer lies in the complicated nature of vulnerability. Recognizing someone's value and admitting that value are two very different journeys. Right now, your soulmate is wrestling with questions that have no easy answers. What if they've already healed without me? What if hearing from me only brings back pain? Do I deserve another opportunity after failing to recognize what I had? These thoughts don't come from indifference. They come from humility mixed with fear. For perhaps the first time, they are thinking less about easing their own loneliness and more about protecting your peace. That hesitation isn't a sign that their feelings are weak. It is a sign that they finally understand the weight of your heart and the consequences of carelessly stepping back into someone's life after they have fought so hard to rebuild. themselves. Another image perfectly reflects what they are feeling. Imagine listening to an orchestra perform a beautiful piece of music. Every instrument plays perfectly, yet something feels strangely incomplete. After a while, you realize the piano is missing. Most people in the audience may not immediately notice, but those who know the composition understand that one essential voice has disappeared, leaving a silence that affects every note that follows. Your soulmate now realizes you were that essential voice in their life. You didn't always speak the loudest. You didn't demand attention, but your presence quietly brought balance, comfort, and emotional depth to everything around them. Without you, life continues, but it no longer feels complete in the same way. There is an old saying that feels especially meaningful now. The heart recognizes home long before the mind understands its value. Your soulmate is finally living the truth behind those words. Every day apart has become another lesson teaching them what genuine understanding actually feels like. They now know that love is not only about excitement, attraction, or shared dreams. It is about feeling completely accepted in your most vulnerable moments. It is about having one person who sees beyond your strengths and weaknesses and still chooses to remain. That is what you gave them, and that is what they have been unable to replace. As this realization settles deeper into their heart, the fear of losing you forever is beginning to outweigh the fear of reaching out. The silence that once felt easier is slowly becoming heavier than honesty itself. And for the first time in a very long time, they are beginning to understand that some distances can only be crossed when pride finally gives way to truth. As this message comes to its close, there is one truth your soulmate now carries that they cannot silence no matter how hard they try. They have finally realized that what they lost wasn't simply a relationship. It was the rare experience of being completely understood by another soul. For a long time, they believed understanding was something that naturally existed between any two people who cared about each other. They assumed that if one connection ended, another would eventually provide the same comfort, the same peace, and the same feeling of being seen without explanation. But life has gently revealed something very different. They have discovered that genuine understanding is one of the rarest gifts two people can share. It cannot be forced, borrowed, or recreated simply because someone wishes it to exist. It grows quietly through patience, trust, compassion, and countless moments where two hearts learn each other's language without needing perfect words. Looking back now, they realize you spoke that language fluently, and they never fully appreciated how extraordinary that was until your voice was no longer part of their everyday life. Imagine an old tree standing at the center of a quiet field. For years, travelers stop beneath its branches without thinking much about the shade it provides. They rest, regain their strength, and continue their journey, believing another tree will always appear farther down the road. But one day they return to that same field only to find the tree gone. Suddenly the warmth of the sun feels harsher. The road seems longer. The journey becomes more exhausting than they ever remembered. Only then do they understand that the tree wasn't simply part of the landscape. It had quietly carried them through seasons they never could have crossed alone. That is how your soulmate now remembers your presence. You were never trying to become the center of their world. You simply offered comfort so naturally that they forgot how much lighter life felt because you were there. Now every difficult season reminds them of the emotional shelter they once had without fully recognizing its worth. Perhaps you've wondered whether they finally understand what made your love different from everything else. The answer is becoming clearer with every passing day. They no longer remember only the laughter you shared or the memories you created together. They remember the feeling of emotional safety you gave them. They remember how they could reveal their fears without worrying about judgment. They remember how you celebrated their strengths without making them feel pressured to be perfect. They remember how you accepted their flaws without using them as reasons to walk away. Those memories have become far more meaningful than they ever were before, because life has shown them how uncommon that kind of acceptance truly is. They now realize that while many people are willing to love someone during easy seasons, very few know how to protect another person's heart during difficult ones. You did that quietly, consistently, and without asking for applause. Think about someone searching for the stars while carrying a lantern in their hand. They spend years looking toward distant skies, believing the light they need exists somewhere far away, never realizing they have been holding it all along. Only when the lantern is lost do they finally understand what had been guiding them through the darkness. Your soulmate feels as though they have finally recognized the light you quietly brought into their life. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't demand attention. It simply made difficult days feel less frightening, uncertain moments feel more hopeful, and ordinary experiences feel meaningful because they were shared with someone who genuinely understood them. Now, without that light beside them, they see how often you helped them find peace when they didn't even realize they were searching for it. There is another realization that has changed them forever. They understand that your greatest gift was never trying to become someone they depended on. Your greatest gift was helping them become the best version of themselves simply by believing in them when they struggled to believe in themselves. You encouraged without controlling. You supported without expecting perfection. You listened without immediately trying to fix every problem. You gave them space to grow while quietly reminding them they were never alone. Those moments seemed ordinary while they were happening. Today, they feel priceless because your soulmate now understands that emotional security cannot be measured by grand promises. It is measured by the quiet peace another person leaves behind in your heart. There is an old saying that speaks directly to this moment. Some people enter your life to change your path, but a rare few change your soul. Your soulmate now believes you were one of those rare souls. They understand that your connection wasn't simply about romance. It was about becoming truly known by another human being. That kind of understanding leaves a mark that time cannot erase because it changes the way a person experiences love forever. They may meet many people throughout their life, but the standard by which they now measure emotional honesty, compassion, and acceptance will always carry the imprint of what they experienced with you. So as this chapter gently comes to an end, don't allow your heart to believe that genuine understanding is ever wasted, even when it seems unnoticed in the moment. Every act of kindness, every patient conversation, every moment you chose compassion over pride became part of a lesson your soulmate now carries every single day. Whether this journey eventually leads to renewed conversations, peaceful closure, or simply a deeper appreciation for what once existed, one truth remains unshaken. Real love is remembered not because it was perfect, but because it made someone feel completely seen. Your soulmate finally understands that the greatest thing they lost was never simply your presence. It was the extraordinary peace of being understood by the one person who loved them without conditions, accepted them without masks, and made their heart feel at home without ever asking it to become someone else. That realization has become the quiet truth they carry wherever they go, and it is a truth that will continue guiding their heart long after this moment has passed.